May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, for you are our rock and our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Over these last couple of weeks, more than a few people have commented on how Easter was so different. It was not how they expected or had hoped that Easter would be. And it is that sense of disappointment that enables us to hear again the story of the road to Emmaus with a new light, a fresh understanding. Because for the two disciples walking along the road on the Emmaus that first Easter day, their day was not like anything that they had imagined either. Their minds were focused on Jesus, who they had last seen on the cross. Their hearts were focused on what Jesus had taught them and how they had come to believe in him and trust in him, something that they were now starting to wonder if their faith was misplaced. And even the woman's vision in the morning telling them that Jesus was alive could not free them from the overwhelming sense of loss that they were experiencing. All they had hoped for had not transpired as they had imagined, so much so that they could not see what was right in front of them, who was right in front of them. And as they walked along, telling the stranger their story, aghast that he didn't know what had happened in Jerusalem, they didn't recognize the presence of Christ, even as he listened so attentively, like he had listened many times before, as he had opened the scriptures to them that they might better understand, and as he explained how Jesus' death was foretold by the prophets. They could not see him. None of it was as they had hoped. And we know that, don't we? That sometimes things don't come together as we had hoped. That how we envision our lives, the things we've planned for, the dreams we've had, don't always turn out as we have hoped. The career paths that didn't materialize, the relationship that ended and changed family life forever, the death of a loved one that means nothing will ever be the same. Even now, as we, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, we have lost so much that we had been counting on, hoping for. Vacation time being stripped away, family celebrations and birthdays put on hold, medical appointments and surgery that have been rescheduled, graduation and proms happening online. I can't help but think of the families of those who lost their lives in Nova Scotia and the compound loss that they might be feeling, not being able to come together as a community to hug and hold one another and grieve together. We are walking a new and uncertain road. Our hearts are fixed on what we had lost and trying to make sense of it all. And sometimes that's all we can do. And our eyes cannot see what is right there in front of us. And here's the thing, maybe we're not ready right now. Maybe we're not quite able to let go of the disappointments and the pain and the loss. Not yet. The disciples weren't. They needed that walk. They needed to tell their story and lament their losses and have a willing listener as they describe what they were feeling. They needed to have someone spend time reminding them of the ways that God was at work and was working in the world. They needed someone to walk beside them on the journey, even if they didn't know that that is what they needed. And Jesus was there. Jesus was the one who listened and encouraged and talked and walked with them, even if they didn't know it was him. And Jesus has a way of doing that, of meeting us where we're at and providing us with what we need, whether we recognize it or not. Jesus has a way of appearing seemingly out of nowhere and walking along beside us until we know we are not alone. He appears as a stranger, and he appears in a friend who listens and tells us that we can survive. He appears in the good news story that reminds you that there is kindness in the world. He appears in the feeling of peace that comes seemingly out of nowhere and lets you know that you are not alone. He appears in the ringing of church bells and in the glow of candles lit in solidarity with Nova Scotia, a province in mourning. Jesus appears in our homes where 2 or 3 are gathered on Zoom or on the phone or in person in his name. And he appears in places where we experience healing and acceptance and grace. Often Jesus appears through you as you actively live as his hands and feet and heart in the world. Yes, Jesus has a way of showing up and walking with us. And eventually, when the time is right, we see that it is him there and that he has been with us all along. We recognize the risen Christ who comes to us and offers us hope and new life on the roads that we walk. We encounter Easter moments right before us. For disciples on the road to Emmaus, their Easter moment was their joy and celebration that came when they recognized Jesus in the breaking of the bread. For Mary Magdalene, her Easter moment was when Jesus spoke her name, as he always had. For Thomas, it was touching the hands of Jesus. And for a friend in the darkness of depression and addiction and feeling that life offered him nothing more, Jesus was revealed to him in a colleague who saw him as worthy and invested time to help him to get clean and to find hope. Jesus shows up. He meets us on the roads of life, and when we are least expecting it, we will experience our own Easter moments when we recognize that in the risen Christ there is new life and hope. Maybe not when we schedule them on a calendar, maybe not as we hoped it would come. And yet the risen Christ comes to be among us in the right way and at the most transformational of moments. Jesus will appear to us and remind us of the joy of resurrection and the promise of new life. May it be so. Amen.